Well, today you're in for a real treat. We found quite a little fern garden. We found 5 different species of fern, all within a really small area, close near each other. So we'll have a look at each fern quickly and kind of talk about the differences. But what we have here is we have some lady fern, we have deer fern, we even have spiny wood fern, a classic, as well as some oak fern, which are much harder to find. And just up the hill in a slightly drier site, we actually have some sword fern as well. So we have quite a few native fern species that are both deciduous and evergreen. And up next, we're going to do a side-by-side to show you some of the distinct features that will help you tell apart these 5 different ferns. So let's start by comparing 3 of our different native deciduous ferns. So we have here oak fern, Gymnocarpium Dryopteris. We also have the spiny wood fern, Dryopteris expansa, and we have the lovely lady fern, Athyrium filix-femina. So let's do a quick comparison to help you tell these 3 deciduous ferns apart. So let's start with the oak fern. The oak fern has an overall triangular shape and is quite small in stature compared to the other 2. It also has a shiny stipe, which is the stalk, quite shiny and a little bit darker in color compared to the other 2 ferns. Another trait to look for is that it is pinnate, meaning it branches. So it has a distinct branching point at the base here. And on the lower leaflets, they're asymmetrical. So one of them is quite a bit larger than the other. So that's how you can look for an oak fern. If we look now at the spiny wood fern, we'll notice it has some similar traits. The bottom fronds are again asymmetrical. So we need to look at more than one thing. You'll notice it also has a triangular shape, sort of like the oak fern, but tends to be much larger in stature, so it grows quite a bit taller, and it doesn't have a branching like the last one does. It just has fronds that go back and forth across the stem. It doesn't have a pinnate structure like we saw on the oak fern. If we're in the right time of year, you can also use the sori, underneath their reproductive structures, to help tell them apart. But right now, it's too early in the season and we don't have any. So we're gonna have to rely on the broader characteristics like I just described. If we look at our 3rd deciduous fern, we're looking at the lady fern. Again, it can look quite similar to the spiny wood fern because they grow similar in size. However, the overall shape is a diamond. So you can see it gets narrow, wide, and then narrow again towards the base. So diamond shaped compared to the other 2. Another thing you'll notice is it doesn't have asymmetrical fronds. So all of the little leaflets across from each other are all the same size. There's no asymmetry like we've seen in the other 2 deciduous ferns. So up next, let's have a look at 2 of our evergreen ferns. So first up is Polystichum munitum, the sword fern. So sword fern is an evergreen fern, like I mentioned, and because of that, it has a really kind of thick, leathery leaflets that are very shiny. So when things are evergreen, they tend to be more tough because they have to last throughout the winter. If we're looking at the sword fern leaflets, you'll notice that they're singular. They're not dissected into many little leaflets like we saw on the other ferns, but they do have this distinctive little bump at the base of each leaflet. This is very important to look for because this will help you know that it's a sword fern. Later in the summer, once the fertile structures develop on the underside of the leaf, oh, there's a few, you'll see little brown kind of circles. And when they're fully developed, if you touch a sword fern, it kind of creates a bunch of brown powdery dust, which are the spores, the reproductive structures of the fern. But yes, very common, thick, leathery, shiny green leaves, and quite a large fern. Our next fern is a bit smaller in size. We're looking at Blechnum spicant, the deer fern. So again, it has some similar traits to the sword fern. It's evergreen, very shiny, thick, leathery leaves, but you'll notice each individual leaflet is quite small and they don't have that extra little bumpy point on them. There's something really cool about deer fern too, is that they have separate fertile fronds. So all the other ferns we've looked at up till now have their reproductive structures on the back side of the leaves, whereas these ferns produce an entirely separate structure for reproduction. So this is what's called a fertile frond. So all of these little individual small leaflets will be where all of the reproductive spore producing structures are. So these grow up in the spring out of the clump of deer fern leaves, and then in the summer, again, they'll turn kind of a brownish, blackish color once the spores are ripe. So deer fern is special in that it has two different kinds of leaves. So that's a summary of how to tell apart 5 of our native ferns.